Peace, family. Welcome to another edition of I Am Sankofa TV. I'm Seneb, and I got a special bill for you today. I want to highlight the accomplishments of a brother named Francisco Menendez, a mulatto leader of Spanish Black Florida. The kind of bill, give you a background what I'm doing. I got a new series I'm starting called I Got a Story to Tell. Pretty much the purpose of this series is to highlight individuals that you might not readily find in your history books, whether it be on the continent or in the diaspora, to kind of bring you some relevant information to people that's not that far away or far ago that did some great things and made a name for themselves in their quest for ultimately freedom. So today, again, I'm gonna give you Captain Francisco Menendez. Again, he was a leader of a mulatto. He was a mulatto leader of a Spanish Black militia, born in West Africa to an African mother and Portuguese father. American story era Berlin considered him Portuguese Angolian. Majority of the family that was being kidnapped, enslaved, and brought over on ships coming to Florida and southern parts of the United States at the time were coming from the Congo, Angola, Gambia regions. So as we continue, he was kidnapped from West Africa and taken to Barbados and ultimately to South Carolina, where he was placed on a plantation. Now, while he was there, he defected and went to the Yamasee Indians and participated in the Yamasee War of 1715, from then ultimately escaping to West Africa. Now, to give you a background on the Yamasee War, it was between British settlers and Indian tribes that included the Yamasee, Cherokee, and other natives. Now, during this war, a lot of colonists were being slaughtered, and some feared total annihilation. And a lot of the colonists at the time fled to Charlestown, which is present-day Charleston within South Carolina. Now, the cause of this war was, of course, trade. There was an Indian slave trade and the killing of deer. Now, to get into the killing of deer, if you go to a movie by, I believe it has Leonardo DiCaprio in it, it's called The Revenant. And Leonardo DiCaprio is pretty much a guide for a group of, I believe it was English military outposts. And their duty was to bring back deer skins, bear skins, pelts, and beaver furs so they can be sold. Now, these furs were being sold in London, England. A lot of the gloves, a lot of the hats and jackets they wore were furs that were brought from the colonies. So the Indians took issue with this because they were killing off all the deer and a lot of the animals. And also through the Europeans dealing with these Native Americans, they were putting them in a lot of debt. So, for instance, like the French sided with the Choctaw and the English sided with the Chickasaw. And they would arm these Native populations. And a majority of the issues that these Native populations had were instigated by the Europeans. So pretty much they'll have the Choctaw, the French use the Choctaw to attack and capture the Chickasaw, and then the French would enslave the Chickasaw, and England would do the same thing, vice versa. So a lot of disputes at the time were instigated. And if you study Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, he highlights that those same tactics were utilized in West Africa, or in Africa, period, where Europe came in, they saw tribal issues, they instigated, chose sides, and then watched as we, destroyed ourselves. And then ultimately, we both were in chains. So that's just a little backdrop on the Yamasee War. Now, one of the things that angered England was the Spanish. Now, the Spanish controlled certain parts of Florida, particularly East Florida. They also had territories in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and some parts of Georgia. Actually, if you live in Atlanta, the Ponce de Leon market is actually named after one of the Spanish conquistadors. I believe he has the Ponce City Market, and also the Ponce de Leon Springs were actually named after him. So the Spanish, back to Spain, in 1733, Spain put out an edict that said that any enslaved persons that would come to Florida shores or Spanish-controlled shores would be free. Now, and a fun fact about it is this was offered before Lord Dunsmore did it and before Lincoln did it. So I think that was kind of a fun fact to throw in there for the family. See, I got it highlighted in yellow. I mean, sorry, not yellow, but red. And also, these blacks at the time, along with Native Americans who were also enslaved, were used to clear out trees, build homes, for the colonies and for the Spanish. A trade was a big deal. So as you got an influx of colonists coming in, they got to have somewhere to live. So they were utilizing these Native American Indian slaves and African enslaved to do a lot of this work. They had plantations that was going, especially in the southern parts, in the Louisiana region, rice, indigo, states like Virginia, North Carolina was tobacco was heavy at this time. And these slave populations, or enslaved, I'd rather say populations, being utilized to work that land. So back to Francisco Menendez. Of course, he escaped after the Yamasee War. He escaped from Florida, went through Georgia, and ultimately landed on Spanish land. Now, of course, there was a price put on his head, but it didn't matter because he was not protected by the Spanish. Under the conditions from the Spanish, he accepted Catholicism, was baptized, and given his name. Others believe that he got his name from an individual named Francisco Menendez Marquez, who ultimately would come to own this brother when he got to Florida. Now, the important thing about the fact that he accepted Catholicism, we know from the late 1400s that Jael II, King of Spain, had already sent missionaries to the Congo region and was converting family to Catholicism. And I believe Nzinga Nkuwu was baptized, converted, and he changed his name to King Jael to commemorate the Spanish king. So the family who was coming from these regions already had an understanding and a form of Catholicism. So this probably made it easier for the brother. And he understood that he could manipulate Catholicism to get his freedom. Now, it took him some years. He had to prove himself on the battlefield to ultimately win his freedom. So there was letters going back and forth between him, the governor at the time, and then the King of Spain. So they saw some attributes about the brother that they can utilize. Because one of the things that the English was feared most, besides the insurrection, was armed Africans. So, because I think at the time in South Carolina, the enslaved population well outnumbered the colonists. So I think even Benjamin Franklin published in his Gazette about the fear and the rumor that was going around about Spain having actually militias of armed enslaved Africans who were doing Spain's bidding for them. So Francisco Menendez was appointed commander of the Black Militia in 1726 at Garcia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose, or Fort Mose. Now, creating a reputation for himself as a soldier, he assisted in defending St. Augustine, which won him his freedom. In different competition with the British took over an abandoned town of Mose and a small fort. Before dawn, January 26, 1740, Francisco Menendez led a force of 300 men, attacked and overwhelmed the British troops, causing them to flee from Fort Mose. Now, because of his gallantry, the governor at the time, Montiano, wrote a letter to the Spanish crown and said, "I have reserved Francisco Menendez in various functions, particularly in the matter of his quarters that the enemy established at Fort Mose, where they were completely beaten, killing 75 men and imprisoning 35, which he did with much valor. Likewise, when the enemy came to town itself, Menendez took his men, maintained gunfire until the enemy retreated." So this letter was sent to the Spanish crown, and this is what ultimately led him to becoming free. So that was a very big deal for the brothers and others who was there at the time. He wasn't the only one, and I may do some bills about some of the other brothers down there at the time, but this is what they had to do to get free. Not only did they have to convert to Catholicism, they had to participate in the battles and wars of Spain. So To continue on, in lieu of another attack, he turned to the seas, but he was captured and resold into slavery. The Spanish ransomed for his freedom, and he returned to Florida, where he began to rebuild Fort Mose. The British took over East Florida after defeating France in the 7 Years' War. A condition reached allowed British to trade territory with Spain. Now, in regards to the territory, Spain at the time pretty much controlled East Florida. The British had West Florida and the lower colonies, and France at the time had the Louisiana region. But France, because of the 7 Years' War, had to train territories with Spain. So Spain kind of took over the Louisiana, Mississippi region, and still held control of, again, territories in Cuba, Florida, Puerto Rico, and Mexico, and some parts of Georgia. All right. So eventually they had to flee because the British attacked St. Augustine again, where Menendez and some other members of the colony, they fled to Cuba and established a community called St. Augustine of New Florida. And if you actually Google St. Augustine of New Florida and put Cuba in the search bar, it'll come up with a whole page dedicated to Francisco Menendez. Also, there's a book called The Biography of Black Florida. I think the author is Lisa. If you want, hit me up in send me an email and I'll send you the references for that book. But it's called The Biography of Black Spanish Florida, something like that. Just throw it in your Amazon, you'll be able to find it. But here's some of the references. The American Slave Trade. It's a great book. I just finished it. If you want to get, it pretty much talks about how there was a slave breeding industry in the United States at the time, or preferably in the colonies. So you got Landers, Igor Berlin, who I was talking about earlier, and two wikis. If you want some other sources about this great man, shoot me an email to iamsankofatv@gmail.com, and I'll send you over those articles. But again, the purpose of this series is to highlight individuals, like I said, that you don't readily find in your history books. Great men and women, either on the continent or in the diaspora, that did what they had to do. Because they try to paint this picture like we were just some savages and we were dumb. But no, we were civilized from nations. So that's the purpose of this series, to kind of highlight. If you got some individuals you want me to speak on and build on and do some research for you, just shoot me an email, throw a comment on this video. More importantly, like, share, and subscribe. I'm gonna try to be more, active on YouTube. I got a couple books I'm reading right now and I'm studying. So I got some heat coming for the family real soon. I appreciate you for coming by. Join me on another I Am Sankofa TV build. Catch me next week. I'm gonna come with another build. I'm choosing who I'm gonna do next, but I'll let you know. I'll throw an advertisement up for the family. Peace.